It was just a typical Tuesday morning, the kind that promised nothing out of the ordinary. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee, when my daughter, Emily, handed me a stack of papers. "Just sign here, Mom. Tom says it's a formality," she said, her voice light, as if nothing was wrong. But at that moment, I knew. Something had changed. Something had been taken from me without my knowledge, and I had no idea how deep the deception ran. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where. At first, I didn't question it. It all seemed so harmless, just a few papers for some investment deal Tom had been talking about for weeks. He'd been so persistent about helping me with my finances, making everything sound so simple. I trusted him. After all, he was family. But as the days went by, something about that stack of papers kept nagging at me. I hadn't fully read through them, trusting Emily's assurance that it was all in order. But that nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Later that week, I noticed the first hint that something wasn't right. A letter arrived, marked with the unmistakable logo of a law firm I didn't recognize. I opened it with shaking hands and quickly scanned the contents. My heart stopped. There, in black and white, was the confirmation of what I had feared. The deed to my home, was no longer in my name. I had signed something, but I hadn't remembered doing so. Panic set in. I immediately tried to call Emily, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I could feel the walls closing in, and the silence around me grew heavy, suffocating. My mind raced. How could I have been so blind? I walked to my bedroom, staring at the walls that had witnessed a lifetime of memories. The smell of my late husband's cologne still lingered in the air, a haunting reminder of what I stood to lose. I hadn't been prepared for this, not for betrayal from someone so close to me, someone I had welcomed into my home, trusted with my life. The next day, I sat down with a pen and tried to remember the details. What exactly had I signed? And why had no one mentioned the consequences? Was this all Tom's doing, or had Emily been complicit too? Every passing hour felt like a betrayal I couldn't quite understand, and I had to get to the bottom of it. I couldn't let this stand. This was my home, my family, and I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers without a fight. But where would I start? Who could I trust now? The thought of going up against Tom, someone who'd always seemed so charming and well-spoken, was daunting. And Emily? Well, I wasn't sure what to think anymore. I needed answers. But more than that, I needed proof that I hadn't imagined the life I'd built. Proof that my home wasn't just an asset for them to take. That I had no idea where this journey would take me. But one thing was certain, it wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be quick. The wheels had been set in motion, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. The truth is a slippery thing. It hides in plain sight, tucked away in places you least expect. And when you start pulling at the threads, you realize just how tangled the web has become. The next morning, after a restless night of tossing and turning, I decided to do something I should have done weeks ago: look at the documents myself. I pulled the papers Emily had handed me from the drawer and began to sift through them. The ink on the pages was smudged in places where my trembling hands had left marks, but that didn't matter. What mattered was what was on those pages. The first paper looked harmless enough, an agreement for some kind of investment deal Tom had mentioned. But as I turned the page, I saw it, a transfer of ownership form, signed by me, transferring the deed of my house to Tom. I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was spinning, and my heart slammed in my chest. I had never signed anything like this. Not only had I not signed this transfer, but the signature on the form wasn't even mine. The more I looked, the angrier I got. Tom had manipulated me, had lied, tricked, and forged his way into taking everything I had worked for. The first wave of panic passed, replaced by a cold sense of clarity. I had to figure out how he'd pulled this off. I needed to know where the forgery had occurred, how deep his plans had gone, and how I could expose him for what he'd done. I immediately went to the old filing cabinet in the corner of my living room where I kept every document related to my house, mortgage papers, insurance, everything. My fingers fumbled through the stacks, sorting through receipts and letters, until I found the original deed to the house. I laid it down next to the forged document for comparison. It was clear now, Tom had used a fake notary stamp. He'd somehow bypassed the system, using his charm and deceit to get his hands on everything I held dear. The silence in the room was deafening. I hadn't just lost my home, I had been duped by someone I had trusted. I thought back to every conversation I had with Tom, his smooth words, his promises of financial security. How could I have been so blind? I picked up the phone and dialed a number I'd never thought I'd have to call. A lawyer. I knew it was time. There was no turning back now. I wasn't just fighting for a piece of property. I was fighting for my dignity, for my sense of self. I didn't care how long it took, or how much it cost. I wasn't going to let Tom get away with this. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and research. I dug through old records, legal documents, and anything else I could find that might prove my case. Each day, I felt the weight of the situation settle deeper in my bones, but I also felt a strange sense of resolve. I wasn't going to let this go. I had fought too hard for everything I had in this life to let it slip away without a fight, and that's when it hit me, the piece of the puzzle I'd been missing. I didn't have to fight this battle alone. There were people out there who could help me, who would help me. I had been so consumed with the betrayal that I hadn't realized the strength I still had. And now, I was ready to use that strength. The next day, I reached out to a lawyer I'd heard about from an old friend. We set up a meeting, and I gathered all my evidence. When I sat across from the lawyer, I laid everything out on the table. I showed him the forged document, the deed, and my original paperwork. He looked over everything with a calm expression, but I could tell from the way he leaned back in his chair that he was just as appalled as I was. He looked me in the eye and said, "We can take this to court, Maggie. It's not going to be easy, but we can do it." I nodded, feeling the first real flicker of hope I'd felt in days. The fight was just beginning. But at least now, I had a chance. It wasn't long before I found myself standing face to face with Tom and Emily. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of anger and fear swirling inside me. Emily, ever the optimist, greeted me with a warm smile as if everything were normal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly, irrevocably wrong. I put the papers on the table between us, my hands trembling slightly, but my voice steady. "I know what you've done, Tom," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. He froze for just a moment before his confident smile faltered, just enough for me to see the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. "What are you talking about, Maggie?" he asked, leaning back in his chair with a look of false innocence. "You must be mistaken." "No," I replied firmly, "I'm not mistaken. I've seen the forged documents. I've seen the transfer of my home into your name. You've tricked me, Tom, and you've done it with Emily's help." The words tasted bitter in my mouth, each one a stab of betrayal. Emily's face paled as she glanced nervously between Tom and me. "Mom, please? You're not understanding," she started, her voice shaking. "This was all to help you. Tom said he was doing it for your financial security." "Financial security?" I repeated, a sharp laugh escaping my lips. "You think this is about my security? You've stolen from me, and you're trying to cover it up with pretty words and lies. How could you, Emily? How could you stand by and let this happen?" I watched as Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes avoiding mine. She was torn, I could see it, but the damage was done. Tom, on the other hand, was growing more defensive. He stood up, towering over the table. "This is nonsense, Maggie," he said, his tone rising. "You're making a scene for no reason. We've done everything legally, and you're only hurting yourself by making accusations like this." But I wasn't backing down. "Legally?" I scoffed. "Tom, you may have fooled everyone else, but you're not fooling me. I'll take you to court. I'll expose everything. This isn't over." Tom's eyes darkened, and for a moment, I saw the true extent of his manipulation. He had calculated this move carefully, and now, it seemed, he was playing the victim. "You think the courts will believe you over me?" he sneered. "You're just an old woman with a grudge. You'll lose, Maggie. You'll lose everything." I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I refused to let him see my fear. "We'll see about that," I said, standing my ground. "I'm not giving up without a fight. This isn't just about my house. It's about respect. It's about truth. And I'm not going to let you steal that from me." Emily stood up, her hands shaking. "Mom, please," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know. I didn't understand what Tom was doing." I shook my head, disappointment and hurt flooding through me. "You should have, Emily. You should have known. But now, it's too late. The truth is out. And you can't hide from it." Tom stepped in, trying to smooth things over. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "We'll figure this out. There's no need for this to escalate." But I wasn't listening anymore. I had made up my mind. This was happening. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me or my family any longer. With one last look at both of them, I turned and walked out the door, my heart heavy but my resolve stronger than ever. As I stood outside, the cool breeze hit my face, and I took a deep breath. This wasn't just a fight for my home, it was a fight for my dignity, my life. I knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready. No more lies. No more pretending everything was fine. I was going to take back what was rightfully mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone stand in my way. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. I barely had time to catch my breath before I found myself sitting across from a lawyer in a small, cramped office. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with thick, dusty legal books, and the scent of coffee lingered in the air. I sat in the worn chair, clutching the papers, my knuckles white with the pressure. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew this was my only option now. The lawyer, a middle-aged man named David Miller, looked at me over his glasses, his expression serious. "Maggie, we've got a strong case here," he said, his voice calm and confident. "The forged documents, the fact that Tom manipulated you into signing, all of it. But you need to understand, it's going to take time. And it's going to be messy." I nodded, trying to steady my shaking hands. "How messy?" I asked, my voice a little hoarser than I wanted it to be. "It could get ugly," he said. "Tom's got money, and money talks in these cases. He'll fight you every step of the way. But if we can prove the forgery and the manipulation, there's a good chance the court will rule in your favor. But we'll need more evidence." I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. I had already seen how far Tom was willing to go to get what he wanted. I couldn't afford to back down now. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I just want my home back." David gave me a small, reassuring smile. "I believe you. And we'll make sure Tom doesn't get away with this." The meeting was over far too quickly, and as I walked out of the office, I felt the enormity of the situation crash down on me. I hadn't just been betrayed by Tom, I had been betrayed by Emily too. But she was still my daughter, and part of me wondered if I could ever repair the damage between us. As the days passed, I threw myself into gathering evidence. I dug through old files, pulled out every scrap of paperwork I could find, and started keeping a detailed log of everything that had happened since I'd signed those papers. David had advised me to be meticulous, and I took his advice to heart. I knew that if I was going to take on Tom, I needed to be ready for anything. One evening, I was going through some old family photos when I stumbled across a receipt from a meeting I had attended a few months before. It was from a meeting with Tom and his lawyer, and there was something about it that didn't sit right. I dug deeper, cross-checking dates and details. And then it hit me, the date on the receipt didn't match up with any of the meetings Tom had mentioned. This was it. This was the proof I needed. I felt a spark of hope as I realized that I might actually be able to fight this after all. It was a small victory, but it was enough to keep me going. I wasn't going to let Tom take everything from me without a fight. I knew the road ahead was long and filled with obstacles, but I was more determined than ever to take him down. The following week, I met with David again, this time with the new evidence in hand. As he reviewed the receipt, his eyes narrowed. "This is good," he said. "Really good. It shows Tom's lawyer was involved in the deal before you even signed anything. We'll use this in court." I felt a rush of relief, but it was quickly replaced by a deep sense of unease. We were making progress, but it wasn't over yet. Tom still had plenty of tricks up his sleeve, and I knew he wouldn't go down without a fight, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of power I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't just sitting back and letting things happen. I was taking control of my life again, one step at a time. The next few days were filled with more meetings, more paperwork, and more frustration. But as I sat in my kitchen one evening, reviewing everything I had collected, I realized something important. This wasn't just about my house. This was about reclaiming my life. My sense of self. And I wasn't going to let Tom, or anyone, take that from me. The battle was just beginning, but I was ready. It was a rainy afternoon when I found it, the piece of the puzzle that would change everything. I had been going over some old family documents, the ones I thought might be irrelevant, when I found a small envelope tucked behind a stack of papers. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it and pulled out a set of receipts from a notary service I'd never used. As I unfolded them, my hands froze. The notary stamp on the receipt was identical to the one on the forged documents. But what really made my blood run cold was the date. The receipts indicated that the documents had been notarized weeks before I'd even signed them. I sat back in my chair, the weight of the discovery hitting me like a freight train. Tom hadn't just forged my signature, he'd orchestrated the entire thing well in advance. He had set the wheels in motion before I even knew what was happening. He'd planned this from the start, using his charm to convince me that everything was fine, while secretly taking control of my life. The realization hit hard. But there was something else gnawing at me, a quiet rage. This wasn't just about losing my house anymore. This was about the betrayal, the calculated deception that had been carefully crafted, piece by piece. I had trusted him. I had welcomed him into my family, and he had taken advantage of that trust to manipulate me, to strip me of everything I'd worked for. I couldn't let him get away with this. I wouldn't. I immediately called David. My voice was shaking as I told him what I'd discovered. David, the notarization was done weeks before I even knew about the documents. This wasn't just a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was planned. David's response was calm, but I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. This is huge, Maggie. This is exactly the kind of proof we need. It shows intent, it shows manipulation. We can use this in court, and it strengthens your case significantly. I hung up the phone, my mind racing. Tom had thought he could outsmart me, but now, I had him. I had the evidence to expose him for the fraud he was, and there was no going back. The weight of it all settled over me. What I was about to do wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, about taking back control of my life. The next day, I met with David again to go over the new evidence. As he reviewed the receipts, I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. This is a game changer, Maggie, he said. With this, we've got a solid case. Tom won't be able to talk his way out of this. But even as I felt a sense of victory, a part of me hesitated. I wasn't naive, I knew Tom wouldn't give up easily. He would fight this, and he would fight dirty. I could already picture the courtroom drama, the lies he'd tell, the way he'd try to twist the truth. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the truth on my side, and I knew that was all that mattered. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table, I reflected on how far I had come. Just a few weeks ago, I had been oblivious to everything. I had trusted the people I loved, and they had betrayed me. But now, I wasn't just fighting for my home, I was fighting for myself. For my dignity, and for the woman I had always been. Before the lies started to creep in. As the rain continued to pour outside, I felt a quiet resolve settle over me. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I wasn't backing down. I had the evidence. I had the strength. And most importantly, I had the will to fight. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. The phone calls started coming more frequently. I couldn't go a day without hearing from David, trying to piece together the last remaining details for our case. The more we uncovered, the more it became clear, Tom's network of lies wasn't just contained within my family. It stretched far beyond that. He'd been working with other professionals, all willing to turn a blind eye for the right price. His web of deceit was bigger than I had initially thought. And that fact terrified me. The first obstacle came when I tried to reach out to Emily. Despite everything that had happened, part of me still wanted her by my side, and I needed her help. I knew the damage that had been done, but I hoped, naively, perhaps, that she might come to her senses and realize just how far Tom had gone. I called her multiple times, but her phone calls went unanswered. Every attempt to reach her was met with silence, and then, something unexpected happened. An old friend of mine, Janet, called me one evening. Janet and I had been close for years, our children grew up together, and we had weathered many storms. But after my husband's death, we'd lost touch. Now, she was back, and for some reason, I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't with anyone else. As I walked into the courtroom, my eyes instinctively sought out Tom. He was sitting with Linda, his face unreadable, his posture as smug as ever. But I wasn't fooled. Behind that confident mask was a man who had committed fraud and manipulation, and today, he would answer for it. David, my lawyer, motioned for me to sit at the table next to him. He whispered something reassuring, but it didn't fully ease my nerves. I was too focused on the task ahead. Too consumed by the overwhelming feeling that everything depended on this moment. The judge, a stern man with a calm demeanor, called the court to order, and the proceedings began. Linda Graves was the first to speak, and she wasted no time launching into her attack on me. She painted me as a confused, elderly woman who had signed documents without fully understanding what they were. She implied that I was just a victim of my own naivety, someone who couldn't keep up with the complexities of modern business deals. I listened in silence, every word she spoke cutting into me like a knife. The lies were so smooth, so well crafted, but they were still lies. And I was not going to let her get away with it. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on me. I looked at the judge, the jury, and finally, at Tom. I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let him off the hook. No matter how much he tried to twist the story, I've spent my life building a home. A family, I began, my voice steady but firm. And I trusted Tom. I trusted him because he was family. But he lied. He manipulated me. He forged documents, and he took my home from me. And I won't let him get away with it. I turned to Tom, locking eyes with him for the first time that day. You thought I wouldn't fight back, didn't you? I said, my voice gaining strength. You thought you could take everything from me and walk away unscathed. Well, you're wrong. I'm here, and I'm fighting for what's rightfully mine. The courtroom was silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could see the faintest twitch in Tom's face, the smallest crack in his carefully crafted facade. But I wasn't done yet. I have proof, I continued, and I'm not the only one who knows what you've done. I've gathered everything I need to show that you've been lying, manipulating, and forging your way through this whole thing. You won't get away with it, Tom. Not now. Not ever. David stood beside me, presenting the evidence, each piece of proof backing up my claims. Receipts, notarized documents, witnesses who had come forward, all of it came together in a solid case that even Linda Graves couldn't dismiss. As I sat back down, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just reacting to everything that had been done to me. I was taking control. And I was going to win. Tom's lawyer tried to spin the evidence, but it was clear that the tide was turning. Linda's arguments grew weaker, and even she couldn't hide the frustration in her voice. I had proven my case, and there was no escaping the truth anymore. The judge called a recess, and as I stepped outside the courtroom, I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. I had done everything I could. Now, all I could do was wait. As I sat in the waiting area, I looked at the clock on the wall. Minutes turned into hours, but the anticipation was unbearable. What would the judge decide? Would he rule in my favor, or would Tom find a way to escape justice? Then, the doors opened, and the judge re-entered the courtroom. The room grew still as he sat behind the bench and prepared to deliver his decision. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears as I waited, and then, the moment of truth arrived. The judge looked at me, then at Tom, and finally, he spoke. I have reviewed the evidence, and I find that the defendant, Thomas Richardson, has engaged in fraudulent activity with the intent to deceive the plaintiff, Margaret Harrison. I hereby rule in favor of the plaintiff. A wave of relief washed over me, and I felt the tears welling up in my eyes. It was over. I had won, but as the judge banged his gavel and the courtroom began to empty, I couldn't help but think about what came next. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was a victory for my dignity, for my home, and for my future. I had reclaimed what was mine, and now, I was ready to rebuild. The courtroom was quiet, the kind of silence that presses in on you when something momentous is about to happen. My heart still raced as I sat at the table, waiting for the judge to render his decision. My hands were folded in my lap, the file of evidence sitting on the table between me and David. The moments before the verdict were stretched thin, like a taut wire about to snap. Tom sat across from me, looking more composed than I felt, but I knew he was just as anxious as I was. This was it. The moment everything would change. I watched as the judge carefully reviewed the documents, glancing at us both, before finally speaking. Having considered all the evidence presented in this case, including the forged documents, the testimonies, and the actions taken by the defendant, I have reached a decision. I felt the air in my lungs freeze. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath until the words came tumbling out. The defendant, Thomas Richardson, is found guilty of fraud. The transfer of property was done under false pretenses. And the plaintiff, Margaret Harrison, is hereby awarded the full return of her home, along with compensation for legal fees and damages. A deep breath escaped me before I could stop it. My hands began to tremble, but this time, it was a good tremble. The kind that comes with relief, with the weight of a battle finally lifting from your shoulders. It wasn't just a victory. It was justice. Justice that had seemed so far out of reach, but was now firmly within my grasp. Tom didn't speak immediately. His face had gone pale, the color draining from his cheeks as the reality of the judgment sank in. Linda Graves, his lawyer, stood there for a moment, her usual confidence faltering. The room was alive with murmurs, but I only heard the rush of blood in my ears. I had won. And nothing could take that away from me. David turned to me, a small smile tugging at his lips. You did it, Maggie. This is it. It's over. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment, still in shock. It felt like a dream, like any moment I might wake up and find that none of it had really happened. But the judge's words were final. They were real. And in that moment, I realized something else. I had stood up for myself, and I had won. I wasn't the helpless old woman Tom had hoped I would be. I was a fighter. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a surge of pride wash over me. But there was also a quiet sadness in the back of my mind. The damage that had been done to my family couldn't just be erased by a court ruling. Tom had taken something more than just my house. He'd taken my trust, my peace of mind, and in many ways, he'd torn at the fabric of our family. I knew the road to healing wouldn't be quick. Emily hadn't shown up in court, hadn't even responded to my calls or messages since our last conversation. She was still wrapped up in Tom's lies, still trying to justify her role in all of this. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I hoped that someday, when the dust had settled, she would understand. She would see what I had done, not just for myself, but for us. For our family. I left the courthouse with David, the weight of the legal battle behind me but the emotional scars still fresh. As we stepped outside, the sun had broken through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the city. It was a new day, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. David turned to me with a smile. So, what now? I smiled back, a quiet confidence in my voice. Now, I go home. Home. It felt like such a simple word, but after everything I had been through, it meant everything. It wasn't just a house, it was the place where I had raised my children, where my husband had lived, where I had made a life. It was my sanctuary, and now it was mine again. As I walked away from the courthouse, the sound of my footsteps echoed in my ears. I wasn't just walking away from a victory. I was walking toward a new chapter. A chapter where I was in control, where I could rebuild my life on my terms, and I wasn't alone. Janet had been there for me throughout the entire process, and even though the battle was over, I knew that the people who truly cared about me would always be by my side. I had been tested, and I had come out stronger on the other side. This wasn't just a win in court, it was a win for my soul, my spirit, and my future. I was ready for whatever came next. The court decision marked the end of a chapter one never thought I'd have to face. But as I sat in my living room that evening, I realized it wasn't the end at all. It was the beginning of something new, something I hadn't imagined just a few months ago. The house was still mine, and in that sense, the battle was over. But the real work was just beginning. The months that followed were a quiet time of reflection and healing. I spent hours in the living room, going through old photographs, letters, and mementos, remembering a time when life had seemed simpler. It was a bittersweet process. One part of me wanted to relive those memories, to hold on to the past, while the other part of me understood that the only way forward was to embrace change. The first time I saw Emily again was in the garden. I had been pulling weeds, trying to bring some order back to the yard, when I saw her standing at the edge of the fence. She was looking down at the ground, hesitant. Her presence caught me off guard, but I didn't say anything right away. I wasn't sure what to say. "Maggie," she began softly, her voice tentative. "I've been thinking. A lot, actually. About everything." I set down the gardening tools and walked over to her, my heart racing. "You don't have to say anything, Emily. I know things are complicated." She shook her head. "No, I need to say this. I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I didn't see it. I've been so blinded by Tom and what he said. I've hurt you, and I don't know how to make it right." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so much time focusing on the betrayal, the hurt, that I hadn't realized how much this had been eating at her too. I wanted to be angry, to yell at her for what she had done, but in that moment, I realized something. I wanted my daughter back. I wanted to heal, to forgive, not for her sake, but for mine. "You don't have to fix everything, Emily," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But you have to start with the truth. You've got to find a way to make peace with it. And that means understanding what happened. Not just what Tom did, but what we've both lost." She nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't know how I got so lost." I took a deep breath, a feeling of calm settling over me. "It's going to take time. And it's not going to be easy. But we can rebuild, one step at a time." For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. I held her tight, the weight of the past few months finally starting to lift. The years of silence, of hurt, weren't gone in that moment, but it was a start, a beginning. We spent the next few weeks rebuilding not just the house, but our relationship. It wasn't perfect, and there were still many things unsaid, but we both understood that the most important thing was moving forward, together. I wasn't going to rush it. Healing took time, but I knew it was possible. The love was still there, buried beneath the betrayal and anger, waiting to be uncovered. As for me, I started to think about what came next. There was no going back to the way things were. But I wasn't the woman I had been when Tom first entered my life. I had learned so much about myself, about strength, and about the power of standing up for what is right. I wasn't the fragile, confused woman he had tried to make me believe I was. I was someone who had fought, not just for my home, but for my dignity. And that, no matter what happened next, was something no one could ever take from me. With Emily by my side, and the house, our home, still standing, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready. The lessons I had learned, the strength I had found, would carry me forward. And I would never forget the journey it had taken to get there. In the end, it wasn't just about reclaiming my home. It was about reclaiming myself. "Maggie, I've been hearing things," Janet said, her voice cautious, yet full of concern. "People around town are talking about you and Tom. About the way things are going with your property. I'm worried about you. You know I've always had your back, right?" Her words hit me like a wave of relief. Finally, someone who wasn't blinded by Tom's charm. "Janet, you have no idea how much I need you right now," I confessed, my voice cracking for the first time in weeks. "It's Tom. He's been lying, manipulating me. Taking my home, and no one is listening. I don't know who I can trust anymore." "I'm listening," she said. "And I think I can help." Over the next few days, Janet became my most valuable ally. She started making calls to other people in town, people who had known Tom for years, and slowly but surely, she uncovered pieces of his past, pieces I had no idea about. She found out that Tom had a history of shady business dealings, lawsuits, and a pattern of manipulating vulnerable people. It was all starting to come together. The information Janet gathered helped me understand just how far Tom was willing to go to get what he wanted. But it also gave me hope. If I could expose him, not just for what he had done to me, but for what he'd done to others, maybe I could stop him for good. But as we prepared to move forward, we faced our next obstacle, Tom's lawyer. It turned out that he had hired a top-tier attorney, a woman named Linda Graves, known for her cutthroat tactics and aggressive approach to litigation. I had heard of her before. She was notorious for winning cases by any means necessary. And now, she was the one standing in our way. David was undeterred. "We knew this wasn't going to be easy, Maggie. But we've got the proof. We've got the witnesses. We've got everything we need to take this to court." But even as he spoke with confidence, I couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead was going to be filled with more than just legal battles. Tom wasn't just trying to take my house, he was trying to destroy me. He had already manipulated Emily, and now, I wasn't sure who else he had in his pocket. The feeling of isolation began to creep back into my heart, and I realized just how much I had lost in this fight. Still, Janet's presence was a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. She showed up at my house every day, bringing coffee and stories of the old days, and for those brief moments, I allowed myself to forget the pain and betrayal that had consumed me. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep my spirits from faltering. As the days passed, I knew the time to take action was approaching. The evidence was mounting. The case was building. But Tom wasn't going down without a fight, and as we prepared for the final showdown, I couldn't help but wonder, what was he willing to do to win? And what price would I have to pay to get back everything I'd lost? I wasn't ready for the call I received that day. My phone rang, its sharp tone cutting through the silence of the room, and I felt my stomach tighten. It was Janet. "Maggie, you need to hear this." Her voice was urgent, breathless even, as if she had just run across town to get to the phone. "I found something. It's not good." My heart sank. "What is it?" "It's Emily," she said. "She's been meeting with Tom's lawyer. Behind your back." The world seemed to slow down as the words hit me. Emily, my daughter, had sided with him. The betrayal felt like a slap across the face. All this time, I'd believed that she was just caught in the middle, that once the truth came out, she would see through Tom's lies. But now, she was actively working against me. "I'm sorry, Maggie," Janet continued. "I don't know all the details, but I overheard a conversation when I was at the grocery store. Emily and Linda Graves were talking about the case, about how Emily was going to help Tom win this thing." I was silent for a long moment, trying to process it all. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront Emily right then and there. But I didn't. I knew I had to remain calm. This wasn't just a fight for my home anymore, it was a fight for my family. "Thank you, Janet," I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. "I'll deal with it." I hung up the phone and stared out the window, the rain now falling in heavy sheets, blurring the world outside. I had always been there for Emily. I had raised her, protected her, and loved her unconditionally. But now, it felt like everything had come undone. She was my daughter, and yet, I felt as though I had lost her too, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I couldn't. This was bigger than just me. It was about standing up for what was right, for my dignity, for my future. Tom had already taken so much from me, but he wasn't going to take my relationship with Emily without a fight. The next day, I did something I had been putting off for far too long. I called Emily. I knew I had to confront her, face to face, to try to understand what had happened. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Mom?" Her voice was tentative, and I could hear the strain in it. "Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to talk to you. Now." There was a long pause before she answered. I don't think now's the best time, Mom." "Don't do this, Emily," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of hurt and determination. "I know what you're doing. You're working with Tom and his lawyer. I heard everything." She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, there was an edge to her voice that I hadn't expected. "I'm just trying to help, Mom. You don't understand what's at stake here." "What's at stake?" I asked, my voice rising. "What's at stake is my home, my life. I've spent years building this, and now, you're helping him take it all away. Do you even realize what you're doing?" "I'm doing what I have to," she said, her voice cracking. "Tom's right. He's trying to help us. We're drowning in debt, and he's offering us a way out. I don't know what you want from me, Mom." I felt a lump rise in my throat, and I struggled to hold back tears. "I want you to stand with me, Emily. Not him. He's been lying to you. He's been lying to both of us. She was silent for a long time, and for a brief moment, I thought the call had ended. But then she spoke again, her voice softer this time. I don't know what to believe anymore, Mom. I don't know who to trust. Hearing her say that shattered something inside me. My daughter was lost. She had been so easily swayed by Tom's smooth words and promises. But I still believed that if she knew the whole truth, she would see things clearly. She had to. I couldn't give up on her, not yet. I know this isn't easy, Emily. But I need you to think. Think about what's really going on here. Think about what Tom is really doing. Please, don't let him win. Don't let him turn us against each other. There was a long pause before she answered. I'll think about it, Mom. I promise. I ended the call with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Emily was still my daughter. There was still a chance, however small, that I could bring her back. But I wasn't going to hold my breath. Tom had already done too much damage. It was up to me to fight for what was mine, and, if possible, to fight for Emily too. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls and legal meetings. Tom's lawyer, Linda, was relentless. She tried to find any crack in our case, any loophole to exploit, and she was doing everything in her power to make me look like the unfit mother, the one who couldn't make sound decisions. It was obvious that she had no intention of letting this go down without a dirty fight, but even as the legal battle intensified, I knew one thing for sure: I was not going to back down. Not from Tom. Not from Emily. Not from anything. I had fought for my family before, and I would fight for it again. And if this battle meant losing Tom, then so be it. But I wasn't going to lose my daughter without doing everything I could to save her. The tipping point was approaching, and I had no idea what the fallout would be. But I was prepared to face whatever came next. For myself. For my home. For my family. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected, and my nerves were frayed. It was as if time had sped up, and now, I found myself standing outside the courthouse, clutching the file of evidence I had worked so hard to gather. My hands were cold, my heart beating heavily in my chest. It had taken everything I had, my energy, my patience, my strength, to get here. And now, it was time to face Tom. It was time to fight. Inside the courthouse, the tension was palpable. The air was thick with the low murmur of attorneys and clients, all waiting for their cases to be called. I took a seat in the crowded waiting area, feeling like a stranger in a place I never imagined I'd be. The room smelled like old wood and polished brass, and there was a heavy silence, broken only by the shuffle of feet on the linoleum floor. I could feel Tom's presence before I saw him. His lawyer, Linda Graves, stood in the corner, going over documents with him, her eyes occasionally darting to me. I knew she was sizing me up, trying to figure out how to destroy my case, but I wasn't intimidated. I had the truth on my side, and I knew I had come too far to back down now. When the bailiff called my name, I stood up, my legs stiff with nerves, and followed him into the courtroom. The stark white walls, the cold benches, and the judge's raised platform made everything feel even more surreal. I had never imagined myself in a place like this, but now, I was here, and I was ready.